Now it's official, Zanu-PF has won both the 2018 Parliamentary and Presidential election in Zimbabwe. Political analyst Professor David Moore from the University of Johannesburg joins us now in our studio to give us an in-depth analysis on what transpired north of our border. But we're also joined from our Pretoria studio by Professor Dirk Kotze. And gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'd like to start with the same question we're asking our viewers today. First, what do you think of the outcome, and was it free and fair? Prof Kotze, let me start with you in Pretoria.
Well, I think the question about free and fair is not really a very helpful question. In the end, no, there are very few election results that are actually declared not free and fair, whether you look at almost any election in the world. I think the main question is going to be, and we won't be able to answer it today already, is to what extent this election is a break with the past, represents a break with the past, and to what extent it can create a workable political system for Zimbabwe. We've seen the split between the rural and the urban votes on the one hand, and we've also seen the very slim majority of President Mnangagwa, while he has a very strong support in Parliament. Now, it's now going to be very much incumbent on the MDC. They are going through their own process of trying to unite themselves again. There were many factions within the MDC in order to be able to become a workable opposition party also. Once they've reached that stage, I think the main challenge for all Zimbabweans are going to be how can they work together, cooperate though they are opposition and government, in order to develop an agenda for the country, which is essentially about how to take them in terms of development forward, in terms of the economy, but also in terms of political development, of establishing a more solid political foundation for the future. I think the significance of this election is that it in a sense legitimized the ousting of President Mugabe, and it gave a mandate to the incoming, or to President Mnangagwa, which he essentially didn't have in the interim period between when he became president and with this election.
Prof Moore, do you agree the free and fair narrative doesn't apply?
Well, yes and no. I think the question is worth posing because people respond to it in a very abrupt way, as we've seen, and there's a healthy disrespect for the discourse and the practice. I would imagine a lot of the people on the tweets would be Zimbabweans here in the diaspora who would have appreciated the chance to go up and vote, or to vote here without, getting on the buses or getting on the planes. I met quite a few diaspora people up there, and they were certainly very, very glad to vote, regardless of whether they thought it was really going to be free and fair. And the discourse has lowered over the past 30 years to credible and legitimate. And as Dirk was saying, in comparison with the past elections in Zimbabwe, this has been credible.
In fact, going back to the social media aspect, there were people who were saying that they're happy that it's a post-Mugabe era that has come in, and yet other people were saying that they didn't see credibility in the result. Which side holds more sway?
Well, I think, again, it's both. The last Afrobarometer poll had 40 to 43% on basic questions of 2,400 respondents fearful of military intervention, fearful of violence after the election, uncertain that the election would be counted fairly. I think we saw this result coming, whether it was going to be rigged or whether it's free and fair, because in the past, whenever the legal analysts and the people who are really good number crunchers get their act together, it's too late. And the electoral courts anyway are not totally free and fair. So we also had 60% of the people in that poll saying that they wouldn't mind a coalition government. And I think this result, 50.8%, is very close. There will be a lot of careful counting. Civil society organizations will be counting. The MDC has challenged it. I don't think after what happened a couple of days ago, the MDC is going to encourage people to go on the street, because we have seen what the military does when they take over the police job. They don't have rubber bullets. They shoot to kill.
Yeah.
So we're getting this very interesting dilemma here, or dichotomy, or dialectic, between a coup which was run by the military, and again, it was a divided military, or divided security system. Police were moved out, army came in. We have tensions with the real hardliners in the army, and the vice president, Chiwenga, and Mnangagwa, who really wants to push through this democratic agenda. So we had a military coup, essentially, promising a new democracy. Now, that seems like a bit of a contradiction in one phrase, right?
Professor Kotze, the military intervention and the pursuant violence and the killing of about 6 people came after the fact. The vote had already taken place. Do you think it affected in any way the outcome of the results?
No, I don't think so. I think what we've seen is something which is not unusual, and we've seen it in 2008 in Zimbabwe itself, in Kenya in the same year, in Cote d'Ivoire in 2010, is that after the election and when the results are announced, that becomes now more and more the critical period, and where the real outcome of the election is tested in terms of stability and acceptance and legitimacy. And again, I think this is obviously what happened in Zimbabwe. You know, from a purely political point of view, it's inevitable that the state, or those who represent the state, has the responsibility to provide and maintain peace and security in a society. And from that point of view, it is difficult to say that it is not acceptable for security forces to come in when there is clearly the potential for violence to emerge and to spread across the country. So in that sense, the containment of violence is absolutely an imperative. But I think what we've seen is that they went too far, in my view, in order to do that. But the idea that it hasn't spread beyond Harare is, to a large extent, a good sign. And I think what we are seeing now is a sense of a policy or an approach of containment in order to see if the situation, if the temperature cannot go down, and that political dialogue can develop. And hopefully there's going to be behind the scenes some political dialogue between the leaders, between President Mnangagwa, Nelson Chamisa, and it looks like President Ramaphosa is also involved. And I can imagine that other countries, especially China and the US, will also play their role in order to encourage and even facilitate dialogue between the different parties in this situation.
Thank you so much for staying with us. We're in conversation with Dr. Dirk Kotze, who's in our Pretoria studio, and Professor David Moore. Let's take a look at some of your responses. Blaine, I think you have a caller?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Des. This topic, the elections of Zimbabwe, has gained a lot of traction on social media. A lot of people are interested in terms of the results. We know that President Mnangagwa has received 50.8% of the vote, and his closest rival, Nelson Chamisa, 44.3%. But let's hear from you. We're inviting you to give us a call at 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6847. Also, a WhatsApp line 081-732-8421. Let's go to Brenda now. Brenda, a very good morning to you, calling us from Cape Town. What's your comment?
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you, SABC, for covering the elections for us as Zimbabweans. You really brought the world to our doorstep. Firstly, I feel very responsible for on behalf of the diasporans. I don't know whatever every other Zimbabwean feels that is this side of the world, but I feel very responsible for not having taken part in the elections, because before we can even go on to say the elections weren't, they weren't fair, we need to first account that we actually crossed the border to go and cast our votes first. But right now it looks like we have to go back in silence because we actually didn't take part fully. And secondly, yes, it wasn't the elections weren't fair. I don't think they were fair, but We need the MDC Alliance officials, the leaders, to come out and speak up for us, because the platform they tried to take over yesterday wasn't ours, firstly, and secondly, the international community is waiting for hard evidence, so that it doesn't just look like we're just crying from the past elections that we were, cheated, but that we actually have evidence of numbers that we were actually cheated this time around, so that something can be done. But just generally, thank you guys so much for everything, and I just hope that eventually there is a better outcome for Zimbabwe, because I'm disheartened, and I do not think that we can go back home there and as we had planned. And it's really sad, because we would like to be citizens of our own country, building our own country, but with Zanu-PF leading, it doesn't look like it's going to be possible.
Brenda, thank you very much indeed for your comments. Brenda there from Cape Town. Continue to give us a call on 011-714-6841 and tell us what you're thinking. Professors Kotze and Moore, Desiree, issues of the people in the diaspora, what they're thinking about, the issues of free and fair, whether these elections were free and fair, and also the role of the international community and the observers and what role they played in these elections. Des?
Thank you very much, Blaine. Dr. Kotze, we got an instruction that we're supposed to be releasing you somewhere around about now. So just one last question for you too, actually. This result gives the MDC Alliance 44% sway in the new government. What does that mean? How will that translate into governance in the country? And also, how will the new president start to interact with SADC, with the regional bodies and multilateral organizations around the world?
Well, I think the 44% that was of the percentage that was given to the MDC is not giving them any access to government, because the president is the one who can appoint the cabinet, the ministers, and it is not a government of national unity, or it's not based of proportional representation. So the fact that President Mnangagwa won, even with 0.8%, means that he has access to all the posts within government. The same does not apply in the case of Parliament, but because they don't have a parliamentary system, the results of Parliament is not really relevant for the composition of government. So what we are going to see is possibly that the political focus is going to remain on the president, and that Parliament is possibly not going to play very much of a role. The fact that the MDC has not a lot of support or seats in Parliament means that they cannot really use Parliament in order to promote their cause. I think what is more significant is that there's clear distinctions between the rural areas and the urban areas, as well as the regions within Zimbabwe, and that the patterns of the past to a large extent have been reinforced by these election results. So in a sense, there isn't a shift in the political balance in Zimbabwe for the foreseeable future.
And in terms of interaction with the world and the continent?
Well, I think that to a large extent this is a confirmation of the position that developed now since President Mugabe left. It's not going to change the political and the diplomatic relations between Zimbabwe and the African Union or SADC. It's going to depend to a large extent on what is going to happen now after the election, and to what extent there is a political stabilization, and that the situation of the last few days are not going to develop into general political instability, as well as what is the economic future of Zimbabwe. I think what is maybe changed over time is that because this is now an electoral mandate that the new government has, that they may be able to argue better for especially trade relations with other countries. A major challenge is going to be how to deal with the sanctions, For example, the US reimposed these sanctions very recently, a few days ago. The same with your European Union. And then how they are going to relate to other countries, like especially China, that plays always a very important role in Zimbabwe. So these are going to be aspects of that's really going to determine the future and the international relations of Zimbabwe.
Dr. Kotze, it's a strange question to ask you on air. Should we keep you on or should we be releasing you now?
Well, I'm available for some time still.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's take another caller, Blaine.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. There's a very important point there by Professor Kotze with regards to the re-engagement with the international community. Let's see what Leslie from Cape Town has to say. A very good morning to you, Leslie.
Morning, boss. How are you?
Very well, and you? What's your comment?
Very good, thanks. Well, on my point of view, Mnangagwa, he was once Mugabe's right-hand man. So he knew everything about rigging and everything.
Yes, Leslie, continue.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. You were saying about President Mnangagwa and his relationship with Robert Mugabe?
Yes. So he knew all the steps. And Mugabe, before, with ZEC, let me just put it this way. ZEC, they are under Zanu-PF. They know everything. Those guys, they work together. Instead of working by themselves and not to take sides, but they do take sides for Zanu-PF. And then that's why everyone in the country is saying they rigged the vote.
Leslie from Cape Town, thank you very much indeed for your comment. I guess there's, and Professor Moore, the question is, can President Emmerson Mnangagwa really divorce himself from his former ally, Robert Mugabe?
Thank you very much, Blaine. Mr. Kotze, Dr. Kotze spoke about the reinforcement of the Zimbabwe of the past. The first post-Mugabe election, and Zimbabweans yet again go for Zanu-PF. Prof Moore, take us into the headspace of the Zimbabwean voter through this election.
Well, we've discussed the rural-urban divide. The urban people that I spoke to in the last few weeks were extremely convinced that they would win, that the MDC would win. There was a change going to come. They were convinced that if they went out onto the streets to defend the vote, that their equally poor brothers in the military would not shoot them. So they were wrong about that. Rural voters, there is much more intimidation in the rural areas. The chiefs are told how to vote, and the expensive newspapers don't get there, the tweets and the social media don't get there. And there were stories of military in plain clothes around. You know, people know who they are. And I think a lot of people would have been worried about losing their land, because remember in the 2000s, lots of land was dispensed, but there's no freehold on it. So if you make a mistake, you can lose it. But interestingly, a lot of urban people had moved back into the rural areas because of the economic crisis. So you had a blend there. So back into the headspace of the Zanu-PF itself, I think we have a long, long history of factionalization, of fighting, right back to the 1960s when it emerged out of ZAPU, which was the Joshua Nkomo party, a split there, lots of violence in the streets. We had the Herbert Chitebo assassination in 1975. We had a massive vacuum in the leadership. A young group of young Turks were challenging Mugabe, not directly, but with his policies and with his trips to Geneva and so on. They were all put in Mozambican prisons for 3 years. And then when you come into elections, you get rid of the second most powerful party, the ZAPU within Gukurahundi. Then you have structural adjustment, which destroys the economy to a great extent. You have the unions leading a political party. Lots of violence in the relationships between the MDC and ZANU throughout history. And generally what you see is you see the elimination of an opposition, and then you have more internal fighting. Yeah. And of course that came up with when Joyce Majuru was kicked out in 2014, and Mnangagwa was kicked out but came back with the help of Constantino Chiwenga and the military. Now, Constantino Chiwenga was wavering all the time between supporting Grace Mugabe and Mnangagwa.
Let's talk about the limitations of the military when we get back. But Blaine, you have a caller.
Yeah, that's right. There's Edwin from Johannesburg. A very good morning to you. What's your comment?
Morning. How are you doing, guys?
Very well, and you?
Not so good. But nobody is listening, so why should we keep complaining?
What are you concerned about, Edwin?
All right. I'm referring to the results, from Zimbabwe and stuff. I'm just trying to and just put it out there. The Zimbabwean elections have never been fair. And the results were sort of like wrong. I will try to sort of like make it simple for the other guys who are not sure of what's happening to understand. The first thing is, if you check the results themselves, they are not telling regarding the numbers that were on the voters' roll and what was voted and what was counted. If you have time, maybe you guys from the media and stuff, just go through the numbers, especially from SABC, from ZBC online. It has some numbers it's posted because that's the state media. It takes numbers from ZAC. The numbers that were there cooked later on, they didn't know that the numbers were supposed to be cooked later. If you check the numbers now that they were being announced yesterday, they don't tell you with what they communicated earlier. That's number one. Number two is that we have to give credit to Nelson Chamisa. You see, that guy fought so hard against all systems, military, propaganda, state media, without the budget. Everything was against them. And the simplest thing that I want to say here is a way maybe of communicating to our brothers and sisters in SADC is that Africa is being captured and people are not seeing it. These reports of rigging and stuff, they are everywhere, but SADC is quiet. International community is quiet. The journalists, they are also, in a way, they are being fed with propaganda. The voters' roll, Nelson Chamisa and MDC Alliance and other opposition, they cried out to SADC. There is a problem with voters' roll. There is a problem with ballot papers. Should we go into these elections or should we get it corrected? Nobody commented. Nobody said, no, let's go to Zimbabwe and help Zimbabwe. Remember, Zimbabwe has got a long history of problems in SADC and in the international community. But for people to rescue the people of Zimbabwe, they could have said, the people of Zimbabwe, now they are speaking. Why can't we chip in and help them on the voters' roll? Which they didn't do.
Edwin, the opposition party, the MDC, is seemingly going to go to court. They've been rejected these results. They're calling it fake. You for that? You for a court challenge?
Right. You are right to say they will go to the court. But which court? That's the first question. You see, the system in Zimbabwe, most people don't understand it. And it's very, very unfortunate that the people outside the Zimbabwean border, they don't understand how Zimbabwean situation works. In Zimbabwe, what Mnangagwa tells you on TV is not what he does in the dark. So what people see in the state media, and it's very unfortunate that most of the information you get fed is from the state media. MDC will go to the court. The court will be told what to announce. It's different from South Africa, whereby, we have maybe 90% independence on the court, or maybe 100%. In Zimbabwe, any political issue is not announced as per the credibility of the judge or the magistrate who is presiding over. There's nothing like that. They will go to that judge and tell the judge that if you don't announce something like this, your wife, your kids, or whatsoever, they will disappear. And they will get a way to blackmail the magistrate so that before they sit with the case, the magistrate is already, if you have seen Justice Sigumba, she's a troubled woman. If you have looked at her face, look at how she was going about with the result. It was against her. And as much as ZEC is not independent, it's captured. It's full of military. But the person who is taken as the chair is also captured, and it's not given much room. If you have seen how they were announcing the results, I don't know if you're following. When they realized that Mnangagwa was losing, they decided, number one, to give you results at 10 at night. They have been doing that for years. You know why they did that? They knew that by that time people have already gone back home. By the time it's in the morning, they will have arrived, beaten people up and stuff. As we speak right now, the soldiers, the army, is beating people in the high-density areas, still intimidating people in the rural areas. And that is a sign that Zanu-PF did not win. If Zanu-PF won that election, they would have announced those results earlier.
Okay, Edwin, thank you very much indeed for your comments. We really appreciate your comments. Edwin in Johannesburg. We thought we had another comment from Emmanuel from Johannesburg, but let's see if he comes back to us. Give us a call. Remember, 011-714-6841, the number 011-714-6841. Des?
Dr. Kotze, let's bring you back in again. That caller decrying the fact that the numbers do not tally. It's the same concern that has been raised by the opposition, Nelson Chamisa, saying there has not been proper verification. Your thoughts?
Yes, this is one of the complications of many elections, and it all depends on the quality of work done by the Electoral Commission, to what extent they are using auditors in order to confirm the results. But very often there are issues, even in elections that are really not challenged, about the tallying of voter numbers and voters' rolls. I think the question about the voters' roll is something which comes a very long way. It has been challenged way before this election. Also, the fact that biometric registration has been used is a relatively new development in it. So there's all sorts of reasons to challenge that or to ask questions about that. I think in the end one has to also understand that there's a difference between the two electoral systems that have been used. On the one hand, the presidential election is a relatively straightforward one, which means that there is all votes count equally. But with respect to parliamentary elections, it is very different because it is constituency-based, and therefore the results in each constituency determines who's the single winner in that constituency. And if it means that there are more than two candidates per constituency, it means that the winner of the constituency can receive less than 50%. And if there are several of these type of results, then it means that a political party can win a majority of seats in parliament, but not necessarily a majority of votes. And therefore, one has to be careful not to look at the number of votes, especially at the parliamentary level, and try to translate that into the representation of the parties in terms of seats. That is an aspect that has to be taken into account. With regard to the presidential elections, that is much more straightforward. V11 forms have become a bone of contention. The forms that are issued per voting station, the local results there. And I think that is the focus for the near future, about how to pick these local per voting station with the overall results, and we will have to see. But it is in the hands of the opposition parties, the MDC specifically, to be able to take it to demonstrate to the public that indeed there has been some mismanagement of this.
Prof Mo, your thoughts about the concern of numbers not tallying?
Well, this 0.8% is very interesting, and that'll be one to watch. As Dirk was saying, we really have to count those votes very carefully, and as Edwin, I think, on the radio was saying, that'll be a long process, counting, and elections like to be finished quickly, and, Ramaphosa says, accept, please. I think that the idea of the military being peaceful, that will be tested now. We have some reports yesterday of the MDC MP in Chigutu area who challenged his result and then was given a victory. And apparently the military are chasing him. So that's one place for the media to go. The media has to get out into the country and watch what's really going on, because that's a habit of Zanu-PF. From the Liberation War, you can do things in the rural areas which you don't get away with in the city unless you have bombs. I mean during the Liberation War, not now. Although we did see, remember, we saw a grenade or something in Bulawayo at White City. That was probably from internal Zanu-PF.
Which is what the Zanu-PF was saying, that it was not a weapons-free march. But in reference to what you were saying...
I meant in Bulawayo before the election at the rally, when the grenade or some object blew up and almost could have killed the president and the vice president. That was not from the opposition. You know, that's an indication of the intensity of the internal dynamics within Zanu-PF. So I think basically we can almost ignore international relations, we can almost ignore the elections. What we have to really focus on is the two parties. So the MDC itself was a product on the death of Morgan Tsvangirai of a very quick takeover by one of the three vice presidents. Morgan Tsvangirai did not leave a succession pattern. The party is unorganized. The party had no money. The party did not spend money on didn't have enough polling agents. But rebuilding that party will take a good 5 years. So, and also rebuilding Zanu-PF, because there's tension there. I mean, many of the security forces who were on the wrong side are living in South Africa now. It's not safe for them to go back. And again, that issue of the march a couple of days ago, remember the military was called in. The police could not do the job.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts there. We're chasing the top of the hour, but let's just take one more caller, Blaine.
Yeah, let's just take one more caller before the top of the hour. Top Party from Pretoria, Glenn, is on the line. A very good morning to you. What's your comment?
Good morning, sir. I'm very interested in your topic. The situation in Zimbabwe definitely is going to be a problem to Southern Africa and the whole world. South Africa must be prepared to take more people from Zimbabwe. This election has been rigged. I was born and bred in the rural area, and I'm 61 years today. I'm expecting to have a new leader, a young leader for that matter, to be taking over this situation. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Topati.
Yes,
Go
that's
ahead.
right. You know, I'm 61 years old. I followed this liberation struggle from 1976 up till now. You know, even when the June riot was there, I was here in South Africa already. I've been in Nigeria. I've known this Zanu-PF for a very long time. The struggle in Zimbabwe is a very genuine struggle. It will never end. This militarized government that has put itself in power today will never definitely be able to do anything good. For the international community to recognize the Mugabe government, it's a very big mistake. And the journalists, the observers, for failing and for being shy to be able to say the truth before the world, what they are really seeing over the situation in Zimbabwe. You know, our rural people are not illiterate. They are very clever. I've got a rural home myself, you know, and I live in the peri-urban in Harare. I've got a family. I've got 4 graduates. I've got 8 children. All of them are jobless. Some of them are here right now in South Africa and have been given scholarships at this university. It's so disappointing to see this election being cheating. You know, look at today. The soldiers are all over in the location. They are moving in. Some people are being beaten, you know, for no apparent reason. Please, definitely, the world must think twice. I don't want any world leader to recognize the Zimbabwean situation, or else they are just creating more problems for themselves. People will start tricking in South Africa. Just give it 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much.
Top Party, Pretoria, Glenn, thank you very much indeed for your views. Des?
Just to wrap up the conversation, let's start with Dr. Kotze, who's in Pretoria. Just in wrapping up the conversation, what's the way forward, especially in terms of Zimbabwe's economy?
Well, I think first of all, the most pressing issue is that they must develop again an economy which is liquid, where there is cash involved, where the banking system can be used, and where people can use money in a productive way in order to, in a sense, I can almost say, oil the economy. At the same time, what is exceptionally important for them is that they must get foreign investments to come into the country in order to not only concentrate on agriculture, because there seems to be some developments with respect to agriculture, but to start to diversify the economy away from only or dependence on agriculture and minerals and commodities. And then also to develop in respect of manufacturing and other diversified elements of the economy, and develop relationships with other parts of the world, and then to address the sanctions. And that will mean intense diplomatic activity from Zimbabwe's side, reaching out to the countries who are imposing sanctions on Zimbabwe in order to normalize the situation. Education is going to be a very important aspect. Through the years now, the quality of education in Zimbabwe has declined. It has always been at a very high level. Even we in South Africa acknowledge that. And that has to be put on a sound basis again in order to develop graduates and learners who can really take the economy forward. So it's a long process. It's many structural elements have to be changed. But the potential is certainly there for Zimbabwe to take it forward.
Dr. Dirk Kotze, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. He's joining us there from our Pretoria studio, continuing to talk about Zimbabwe. Professor Moore, your final thoughts. How can we predict Zimbabwe's situation going forward?
Well, I see a lot of rebuilding that has to take place in both parties. I was listening to David Monnier on your other line before, and he seems to be suggesting a line which many are suggesting is that Mnangagwa reach out and bring in Chamisa and some of his people into some sort of a less formal GNU than we had from 2009 to 2013. That can be a poisoned chalice for the opposition party, because in the GNU 2009 to 2013, the MDC was kept busy trying to run things in the government, and the Zanu-PF was busy rebuilding its party, and they won the next election hands down with a combination of cheating and intimidation and fairness, which has been much more subtle this time. So I think both, and within, as I was saying, the MDC will have to decide if those offers go out, whether to take them. I would suggest perhaps not to take them. Maybe David Coulthard, who was number 6 on the Senate, on the proportional list for Senate, I don't think he made it, but he was a very good Minister of Education. Maybe they could pull in a few sort of MDC sympathizers in Kozana Moyo, who actually didn't do too badly in the presidential election as a good economist. Bring if the regime is serious and is cohesive enough, and if the two factions in the regime can agree, that would be good. If the faction which is talked about to be with Constantino Chiwenga fears being pushed out through a more democratic and rational process, they will react with more violence. Mnangagwa will be tempted, I would think, to bring in Chamisa and other outside actors in order to reach the goals that he promised to whatever international actors were involved. And I think
democracy.
Exactly, the UK did play a big role here. The election has some suspect aspects to it, including the violence recently. So the carrot and the stick that was dangling in front of Mnangagwa was, have a nice election, and then the goodies will come down. Now, the price of platinum has just plunged. There is lithium in Zim now, which I think is being contested. Will that be a rational process of bringing in investment? Because there's been investment in Zimbabwe. I mean, there's been the diamonds, and it's not been business-like in the sense that we believe in good governance and this sort of thing. Business will come in like they want to do it in the DRC. They're not going to be that. So you have to have a strong state to regulate business, get the taxes, to fold the taxes back into the educational system and so on. Yeah. But there is no money. That money, it's very interesting, the electronic currency is based on the state forcing banks to buy treasury bills.
The money. That's always the problematic one. It's also a storyline in South Africa. But thank you so much for your time. It's a continuing conversation, and I'm sure we'll continue to watch it. But Professor David Moore from the University of Johannesburg, we thank you for your time. And that's where we're going to have to bring this conversation to an end, and our lines are also closed. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.